welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling a question I think we've all wrestled with at some point.
Yeah.
What really drives success?
Yeah.
Is it all about being cutthroat and climbing that ladder? Or is there a different path?
Right.
Luckily, we've got Adam Grant's Give and Take to guide us.
Okay.
And let me tell you, this book, it seriously challenges some common assumptions about success.
Yeah, you're totally right. We often think about success, assertiveness, competition.
Right.
But what's so interesting about Grant's research is
Yeah.
that it highlights this completely different approach,
Yeah.
one rooted in generosity. And it
Mhm.
can actually be the key to reaching the top.
It's funny you should say that. It almost feels counterintuitive.
Right.
Right. I mean, we're constantly bombarded with messages about, look out for number one.
Yeah.
But Grant, he breaks down these interactions into three, what he calls fundamental reciprocity styles:
Yeah.
givers, takers, and matchers.
Right.
And I'm sure you could already picture these types in your own lives, right?
Totally. Think about that colleague. Always willing to lend a hand. No strings attached.
Mm.
Classic giver. Then you've got the ones who always seem to be kind of calculating what's in it for them.
Right.
Always angling for the upper hand. Those are your takers.
Yeah.
And then somewhere in the middle, you've got the matchers.
Right.
They're always striving for that balance.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
A give and take.
But here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
We've all heard that saying, nice guys finish last.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And it kind of feeds into this idea that givers, those who are always putting others first,
Yeah.
are ultimately going to be left behind, right?
Yeah.
But Grant's research completely flips this.
He does. And it's not just anecdotes. He goes deep into the data and
Yeah.
actually shows that givers they can really rise to the top.
Yeah.
But the key is they don't just give blindly.
Right.
They have strategies to make sure that their generosity is a strength, not a weakness.
Okay, now I'm hooked. What are these strategies?
Let's start with a story. This one really highlights this. It involves David Hornick.
Okay.
He was a venture capitalist known for being a genuinely good guy.
Okay.
Helpful, supportive, the kind of person everyone wants to work with. He meets Danny Shader.
Mm-hmm.
Shader is pitching this fantastic idea.
Okay.
Hornick, he is so impressed, he quickly offers him a term sheet ready to invest. You'd think Shader would jump at the chance, right?
Right. I mean, working with someone known for generosity, that seems like a dream come true.
Yeah.
Especially in the worlds of startups.
But here's the thing, Shader hesitates.
Really?
In fact, he ends up choosing a different investor.
Wow.
Why? Because he's worried that Hornick is too nice. He's worried that Hornick won't provide the necessary push,
Right.
like the constructive criticism to really grow the company.
Right.
He's actually afraid that Hornick's kindness might hold him back.
Oh, wow. That's a plot twist. So it's not just about being the nicest guy in the room. There's got to be more to it.
Exactly. And this is where Grant brings in another crucial point. He makes this distinction between selfless givers and otherish givers.
Okay.
So selfless givers, those are the people that put everyone else's needs above their own,
Right.
often to the point of burnout.
Yeah.
Otherish givers find that sweet spot.
Right.
They care about others,
Yeah. Huh?
but they recognize their own needs and limits as well.
Right. So it's not about going to the other extreme
Exactly.
and becoming, a ruthless taker.
Right.
It's finding that balance.
It's about being generous and helpful, but also strategic and mindful of your own well-being.
Right.
To illustrate this, Grant compares two very talented people, Jonas Salk,
Okay.
the brilliant scientist behind the polio vaccine,
Right.
and George Meyer, the comedic genius behind The Simpsons.
Two very different fields.
Totally different fields.
What's the connection?
So Salk, despite his brilliance, he made a classic taker move. He took sole credit for the polio vaccine.
Oh.
He didn't acknowledge those who helped develop it.
Right. I can already see where this is going.
Yeah.
Taking all the credit rarely ends well.
It didn't. And the scientific community didn't forget it. He was ostracized. He was even denied entry into the National Academy of Sciences. His reputation suffered.
Yeah.
And it ultimately hindered his success.
A harsh lesson,
Yeah.
even for someone so talented.
Yeah.
So how's Meyer's story different?
Meyer is a prime example of an otherish giver. Incredibly talented, but always prioritized helping others shine.
Mm,
He didn't need to be in the spotlight.
right.
He focused on making the entire team better. He even took on less glamorous roles so others could flourish, and his career thrived because of it.
It sounds like true success often comes from empowering others,
Right.
not just focusing on your own advancement. Which makes me think about networks.
Okay.
How do givers approach building those connections differently?
That's where it gets fascinating.
Yeah.
They understand the power of what are called weak ties. These are your acquaintances, the people you might only see at industry events or connect with occasionally online.
Right. It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Exactly.
But I always thought strong ties are close friends, family were the most valuable connections.
Those are crucial for support, for sure.
Well,
But they often have access to the same information and networks as us.
right.
Weak ties can open doors to entirely new circles and perspectives.
Okay, so they're not just collecting business cards, they're genuinely connecting,
They're building relationships.
building relationships.
And Grant introduces us to Adam Rifkin,
Okay.
Silicon Valley software guru, who embodies this perfectly.
Okay.
Dubbed Fortune's best networker.
Really?
He's built this massive, influential network just by offering help and support.
Wow.
No strings attached. A master connector.
This guy sounds like a networking ninja.
He is.
But what about those relationships we've let lapse?
Right.
What Grant calls dormant ties.
Dormant ties, like hidden gems, old colleagues, former classmates, people you haven't talked to in a while.
Yeah.
Research shows reconnecting with those can be incredibly valuable, especially when you need fresh perspectives.
Right, so dust off those old address books.
Exactly.
About reaching out.
What's amazing is those people are often just as happy to hear from you.
Right.
And givers have a natural advantage here. They've built this track record of generosity.
Right.
People are thrilled to reconnect.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's talk about status for a second.
Okay.
We often think of status as being linked to, power, assertiveness,
Yeah.
maybe even a bit of intimidation.
Right.
How do givers, who are often seen as, too nice,
Right.
gain status?
It's a great question. And the answer is in how people perceive them.
Okay.
When we see someone consistently helping others, sharing knowledge, going the extra mile, it sends a signal about their competence
Right.
and character.
So by giving more, they gain more respect, influence.
Exactly. And there's research on this. A study of engineers found that givers in the group had the highest status. They were admired, respected, and it translated into greater influence.
That makes sense. But there's a potential downside, right? We talked about givers struggling with productivity because they're spending so much time helping others.
Yeah.
Does this status boost come at the expense of their own work?
It's a valid concern, and this is where the frequency of giving comes in.
Okay.
It's not just about being a giver, it's about how you give.
So again, it's about finding that balance.
It is. Engineers who gave infrequently, like just when asked, saw a dip in their productivity.
Right.
But those who gave often, who made it a regular practice,
Yeah.
they became the most productive members of the team.
That's fascinating. So it's like this. By consistently giving, they built up this reservoir of goodwill
Yeah.
and trust,
Exactly.
and it benefited them in unexpected ways.
That's a great way to put it. They strengthened relationships, built a reputation, created a more collaborative environment. All of this boosted their own success and productivity.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
It is. Really highlights that win-win,
Yeah.
But let's go beyond individual productivity
Yeah.
and look at how this plays out in groups and teams.
That's a great point. Teamwork is essential in so many areas of life,
Absolutely.
from work to family, everything, right?
Yeah.
So what does give and take tell us about how givers thrive in these situations?
Well, Grant dives into the story of George Meyer. Remember, the comedic genius behind The Simpsons?
Right, of course.
And he wasn't just brilliant. He was known for his ability to get the best out of everyone around him.
The Simpsons is legendary for its writing, that sharp wit.
Oh, yeah.
What was Meyer's secret?
He understood that true collaboration wasn't about taking all the credit or owning every idea.
Right.
It was about creating an environment where everyone felt empowered to contribute,
Yeah.
to build on each other's strengths.
So instead of being a control freak, he was more like a conductor.
Exactly. He was often credited with the ideas, but he rarely insisted on writing the first draft. He recognized his real strength was in the rewriting, the refining, so he took on that less glamorous role,
Right.
polishing the scripts, sometimes for months, working with the writers to shape their ideas into comedic gold.
Talk about putting the team above ego.
It paid off big time.
Yeah.
Meyer's approach helped The Simpsons achieve this incredible level of success.
Right. I mean, it became a cultural phenomenon.
Absolutely.
But let's shift gears a little.
Okay.
Let's talk about those situations where we need to persuade others,
Okay.
right? Whether it's pitching an idea, selling a product, even just getting your point across in a meeting.
Yeah.
How does a giver approach the art of influence?
This is where Grant's concept of powerless communication comes in.
Okay.
And it's one of the most fascinating ideas in the book.
Powerless communication.
Yeah.
Isn't persuasion about confidence, assertiveness, that fake it till you make it thing?
You'd think so. But Grant flips the script. He argues that a more subtle approach, one rooted in vulnerability, a genuine desire to understand others, can be much more effective.
I'm all ears.
So there are several strategies Grant highlights that givers use. Instead of just giving answers, they ask questions.
Right.
They show genuine interest in others' views. Rather than speaking with absolute certainty, they express themselves tentatively, acknowledging they don't have all the answers. And here's the surprising part.
Yeah.
They're not afraid to admit weaknesses.
Wait, hold on. Admitting weaknesses. Isn't that career suicide? Especially if you're trying to project confidence.
It seems that way, but research suggests otherwise.
Yep.
When we ask questions, it signals we value others' input. We're open to learning.
Right.
It shifts the focus away from me.
Yeah, I can see how that builds rapport.
And speaking tentatively instead of with unwavering certainty makes us more trustworthy, more relatable. It shows we're not afraid to admit uncertainty.
Right, because we all have those moments.
We do. And by admitting weaknesses, we become more human, more approachable. It disarms people and makes them trust us because we're not pretending to be infallible.
It's making me rethink everything about persuasion.
Yeah.
It's less about putting on a show, more about being real.
Exactly. And then there's seeking advice.
Okay.
When we ask others for advice, it flatters them, shows we value their expertise, gives them a sense of ownership.
So instead of bulldozing our ideas through, we're inviting others in.
It leads to better solutions, too. And Grant gives this compelling example of powerless communication winning over even the toughest audiences. He tells the story of Dave Walton, a successful trial lawyer, but who has a stutter.
Wow, that's interesting. A stutter in a courtroom.
It's often seen as a liability, right?
Yeah, especially in such a high-pressure environment. How did he make it work?
Walton's stutter, instead of being a distraction, it actually made him more human, more relatable to the jurors.
Right.
They saw him as genuine, not some slick lawyer trying to manipulate them.
So his vulnerability became his strength.
Exactly. And get this. In one case, after winning, several jurors approached him.
No way.
And commended him for his courage.
Wow.
For being a lawyer despite his stutter. They admired him for overcoming that challenge, and it influenced their perception of him.
It's a reminder that what we see as weaknesses can be strengths.
They make us relatable, and that can be powerful.
And that applies beyond the courtroom, right?
Absolutely. Business, relationships, everywhere.
When we embrace that vulnerability, acknowledge uncertainty, and genuinely seek to understand.
It unlocks a different kind of influence.
It's a real perspective shift.
It is.
We're so often conditioned to project strength, even when we're not feeling it.
Right.
But what if embracing those vulnerabilities actually makes us more effective?
It's a great question. Our culture often equates vulnerability with weakness.
Right.
But maybe it's the key to deeper connections, greater trust, more meaningful collaborations.
Yeah. Okay, but back to givers for a second.
Sure.
If they're so focused on helping others.
How do they avoid becoming doormats? Constantly being taken advantage of.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And thankfully, Grant doesn't leave us hanging. He gives us some practical strategies for givers to protect themselves from those who might try to take advantage.
All right. Self-preservation tips. Lay them on me.
So one of the most important is, he calls it sincerity screening.
Okay.
It's all about becoming a bit of a taker detective. Learning to distinguish between those who genuinely need help.
Right.
And those just trying to use you.
So like developing a sixth sense for those takers.
Exactly. Think about those colleagues, always asking for favors, but then they disappear when you need something.
Right.
Classic taker tactic.
Yeah.
Grant suggests paying attention to patterns. Do they consistently ask but rarely reciprocate? Do they talk a big game about being generous but never follow through?
Yeah, it's like looking beyond the surface charm.
Exactly.
And really focusing on actions.
And here's another trap. We assume agreeable people.
It's like, friendly, polite. Those are givers.
Right.
But Grant says not always.
Really?
Takers can be very charming, manipulative. They use agreeableness to exploit others.
So how do we avoid falling for that?
It's about focusing on actions, not words.
Right.
Look at their track record. Do they actually demonstrate generosity?
Right. Actions speak louder than words.
Exactly. And another strategy, being flexible with your reciprocity style. Successful givers, they don't just give to everyone all the time. They adjust based on who they're dealing with.
So it's okay to be a matcher.
Yeah.
Give back in kind.
It's about protecting yourself.
Right.
When dealing with a taker, it's totally reasonable to set boundaries.
Right.
Say no.
Right.
Make sure you're not giving more than you receive.
Be strategic.
Exactly. And sometimes givers need to push past their natural tendency to avoid conflict.
Yeah.
And be more assertive, not aggressive, but standing up for yourself.
Right.
Making sure you're not taken for granted.
So, like, channel your inner mama bear.
Yeah. And Grant tells this story about Samir, a giver.
Okay.
He's hesitant to negotiate a better salary at a new job.
Okay.
Worried about appearing greedy.
Right.
But then he realizes he has a family.
Yeah.
Negotiating a fair deal isn't selfish, it's responsible.
That's a good point. We often think advocating for ourselves is selfish.
Right.
But it's about recognizing our worth.
Exactly. And in Samir's case, his assertiveness actually earns him respect. His boss sees he's not a pushover.
Right.
He stands up for what he believes in.
It's a reminder that assertiveness, done right, can actually enhance a giver's reputation.
It can.
Okay, but let's talk burnout for a second.
Okay.
Giving can be draining
It can.
if you're not careful. How do givers avoid that?
This is where chunking comes in.
Chunking.
It's about being strategic with how you structure your giving.
So breaking it down into more manageable pieces.
Exactly. Instead of everything for everyone all the time. Focus on specific things that matter to you.
Right, so less is more, that kind of thing.
It's about concentrating your efforts so you can make a bigger impact.
Right.
And research shows this actually makes givers happier.
That makes sense.
By focusing your energy, you see the result. It feels more meaningful.
Yeah, not just a drop in the bucket.
Right. Grant tells a great story about Conry Callahan, a young teacher who was burning out
Yeah, I can imagine.
at a tough high school.
Mhm.
She felt overwhelmed, questioning if she was making a difference.
Yeah.
But instead of cutting back, she actually increased her giving.
Really? That's counterintuitive.
It is, but she did it strategically. She started mentoring other teachers, then launched a mentoring program for students.
So still giving a lot, but more focused.
She was chunking her giving.
Right.
Focusing on what really mattered.
And how did that go?
It completely revitalized her, gave her new energy.
Wow.
It's an example of how strategic giving can be a source of strength.
So we don't have to say yes to everything.
Exactly.
It's okay to be selective.
It is. And Grant also says it's not just about individuals. It's about creating systems that encourage giving.
So how do we do that? How do we build those environments?
One way is to make giving visible.
Okay.
When we celebrate generosity, it inspires others.
Lead by example.
Exactly. Make it easy for people to give, build it into the organization.
Right.
Mentoring programs, volunteering, even just encouraging knowledge sharing.
So giving is just part of the everyday.
Yeah. And Grant gives this interesting example of how even takers can become more generous in the right setting. He talks about FreeCycle.
Oh, yeah. I love FreeCycle.
That online community where people give stuff away for free.
It's a great way to declutter.
What's fascinating is that even takers contribute on FreeCycle.
Really?
And the reason is the social norms encourage giving.
Okay, so the environment itself promotes that behavior.
Exactly. It highlights how powerful social systems can be. And Grant calls this the Scrooge shift.
The Scrooge shift.
The idea that even hardcore takers can become more generous when surrounded by givers.
That's a really hopeful idea.
It is.
It shows people can change.
And the environment matters.
Yeah, that's a powerful takeaway.
Absolutely.
So what's the key message for our listeners today? What do we want them to remember from Give and Take?
I think Grant's book really challenges us to rethink how we view success. It shows that giving, when done right, can be a real path to achieving our goals.
Right.
Building relationships and making a difference.
Yeah.
But it's crucial to understand those different reciprocity styles to protect ourselves from being taken advantage of.
Right.
And most importantly, to create environments where giving can thrive.
It's a good reminder that success doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. By focusing on creating value for others, we can ultimately enhance our own success.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with this question to ponder. Could focusing on creating value for others be the missing ingredient in your own journey towards success?
That's a great question. and a great place to wrap up our deep dive into Give and Take. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.